there's this concept of a temporal graph, meaning every time we make a change, like a traditional database, when we make a change, we override the value that is currently in the database, and then we kind of lose the previous value. There are databases nowadays that are able to work like that, but there's always some limitation, and it makes the construction of that much more complicated. In a graph, there is this concept of a temporal graph. So for example, if I come here, and if I make a change to this rack, let's say that now I want to change the index and say, let me change the number of leaves, probably going to be easier, and going to change the checksum, for example, to something like that. So if I make those changes, now if we go back to the graph, what's interesting is we see that the graph is slightly different. And we see, for example, here that now for checksum, there's two values that are automatically attached to the node. It means that we haven't overwritten the initial value that we had for this node. We just expanded the graph and we started storing the new value, which now is here. So that's the new value of my object. And we store that. And what we define in this edge, we just define when that change happened. And we see that we also updated the previous one to say now that the value that is on the other side of this edge is only valid from this timestamp to this timestamp. That's why we call that the temporal graph, because everything that is captured inside is always defined by a timestamp. That's why when we make a query in Infrahub, we can always go back in time. And here, for example, I can go back to a few minutes ago. And a few minutes ago, so it was still, but if I go back at 5 minutes ago, we see that I'm still in main, but I'm able to see the value that is actually active at this specific time. And we can do that because inside the graph, we haven't deleted that value. We just have defined that it's not the one that is active at this specific time. So that's the first concept of this temporal graph. It's super powerful. And the belief is that it works really well with infrastructure management because you always, from a traceability standpoint, you want to understand everything that has changed. You want to make sure everything is tracked, and we have full visibility into that. So that's what we do internally.